I'll just get you to start with introducing yourself and the community you're from.
All right. My name's Daniel Taselli. I'm Dene. My people are Kashogen Dene, and I'm from Radley Cole, which is Fort Good Hope on the map. I grew up in a few different places, so I was born in Yellowknife because there's no hospital back home, but went right back home after a few days. And when I was a kid, we used to live half in town and half on the land. So we would go out usually in the fall and then also in the spring and live in a tent for 2 or 3 months. My dad used to trap back in those days. So when I was a little baby and up until I was about 4, we spent a lot of time living on the land. I moved to Yellowknife when I was 4 and would be back home mostly in the summers. So I grew up half in the city and half participating in a land-based lifestyle. So I spent a lot of time on the land when I was a kid. And for Dene, where I'm from, the rivers are, like, that's the highway, those are the roads. Most of our travel is done on traditional trails in the winter, and then in the summer, whenever the water's open, it's always by boat. So people travel on and rely on the big river, the Mackenzie River, for a lot of things, including transportation, but then all of the tributaries that go into that river, whether they're coming from the mountains or they head out into a wetlands, whatever the area is, all of those tributaries are used by the people to get to places that are significant for harvesting, for fishing or hunting, and to get to places that are culturally and spiritually and historically significant. People rely a lot on food from the land. There's still, when I was a little kid, trapping was still a really important industry, and a lot of people were still making their living on the land, mostly by trapping. That fur industry has really gone down over the years, and there's still a few people, there's still some elders, and there's still some young people who are trapping, but it's very difficult to make a living doing that anymore. People are lucky if they break even. But historically, Fort Good Hope has always been a really important area for furs. Some of the best furs come from around those areas up north. And that continued even into when I was a kid. So my dad and my uncles and a lot of people in our family and our kind of larger family group were trappers. And so when I was a kid, and we were living out on the land, that's what a lot of the adults were doing, is they were focusing on trapping and gathering those furs. These days, it's not as big of an industry, but people still rely very heavily on food that comes from the land. So there's a lot of fish that people get in nets, and people hunt a lot. So some of the staple foods is moose. Moose is very important to us. People eat a lot of moose meat. There's also caribou, waterfowl like ducks and geese. Those are very important. People hunt beaver. So depending on the time of year, people will go to different areas on the land to get different types of food. And that's still very important in our community for a lot of reasons, but one thing that's important to acknowledge is that the price of food in the Arctic is very high. The cost of living is very high. Fort Good Hope's a remote fly-in community, and so it's expensive just to live, and buying just store food gets very expensive, and the quality of the food is very poor. So if people want to eat and eat well and make sure their family is eating well and eat healthy food, it means a lot of that food has to come from the land. So a lot of the land use back home is focused around hunting and fishing. The way young people learn about land use and hunting or whatever the skills are is mostly by going with, like, when you're a little kid, you go out with the older people, like your parents and their generation, and your big cousins and your uncles and aunties, and then also grandparents. And you go out and you stay quiet and you stay out of their way, but you're supposed to be watching what they're doing. So that's always been traditionally how kids would learn, is they're supposed to be there and they're supposed to be paying attention. And you pick things up by watching when you are a little kid, and then as kids get older, they'll be expected to try out more things and take on more responsibilities, and start doing the things that they've been watching for 5 or 7 or 10 years. So that's always how young people were taught the skills to live on the land. So when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time watching people do stuff, and my dad would always make us try out different things, like using an axe when we were about 7 or 8 years old, even just to cut down a little tree, because he always wanted to make sure that we knew how to do it. And making fire, even if we didn't need fire, he would tell us to make fire just so that we know how to do it. And if somebody shot a duck, because you shoot a duck with a shotgun, it's usually not dead. You have to wring its neck. So even when I was like 4 or 5 years old, he would drive the boat by a duck and he'd tell us to fish it out of the water, me and my brother, and break its neck. Or shooting like 22 when we're 5 or 6 years old, just for target practice. So as you start to get older, the adults make sure that you're trying things out, just so that you're starting to learn those skills, so that when you do need it when you're older, you have some experience from watching other people do it, but also from trying it out yourself. And then as I got older and I'd moved to Yellowknife and I was spending less time back home and less time on the land, and then in adult life, going to university, I didn't practice a lot of those traditional skills. So now as an adult, I'm going back and it's like playing catch up. And I think that traditional rhythm of how people used to learn things growing up has been disrupted over the years, because people don't live on the land full time the way they used to. But these days, more and more in the last 10, 15 years, there's a lot of programs that are focused on young people. Like, they're getting this stuff into the schools, to get people into the schools to take the kids out and learn how to skin animals and prepare furs and pelts and things like that. And there's a lot of young people now who didn't learn when they were kids, but are now starting to go out every year, every fall, for a week or two to a hide camp and learn how to practice tanning moose hides. And develop those skills on a regular basis. So they have things like hide tanning camps. They had a camp on how to make dry geese. They have camps on making dry fish. They take the kids out to go trapping. So even though that traditional way of how people were always learning the land skills is not happening the same way anymore, there's also at the same time a really concerted effort from the community to make sure that there's those opportunities for kids and young people to learn those skills at some point in their life. There is some common medicine that young people are taught about on Dene land, like spruce gum is really important to us. So it can cure infection, and it can pull splinters out of you if you get a splinter. So there's some things like that people learn even as kids, that's really valuable to know about. But right now there's not focused programs on that knowledge around medicines. I don't speak my language. We speak a Dene dialect. It's the Kashogen Dene dialect, and I know in English they sometimes call it North Slavey, but the elders don't really like that. They really don't like that. The language back home has been impacted over the last generation or two. I don't speak the language. My dad and my dad's generation are all very fluent. Like, my dad was born in a tent, and he didn't speak English until he was 6. He grew up on the land until he went to school. And so his generation, and up until maybe 15, 20 years older than me, is mostly has the Dene language as a first language, or they're very fluent in it. And these days, like starting around my age, and maybe people a bit older, we don't speak the language. There's a lot of people around my age who will understand it, but they don't practice it and they don't speak it fluently or regularly. And then with the younger people too, it's the language is being lost. So that's a big concern in the community, and people are, especially now that we're losing a lot of elders, people are now starting to take that as a very serious issue and trying to organize ways to make sure that young people have the opportunity to learn the language, and really encourage that, and create those spaces for people to learn the language. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's really important for people to keep going on the land, because I don't speak the language, and I'm not fluent, and I wouldn't know how to have a conversation or say hi, or where's the bathroom, or I want something to drink. But I know a lot of words, and I know a lot of place names, because my dad always tells me that, and my family and elders, when we go out on the land, they always tell me the place names. And those are really important. The different place names, the different words for different things you see on the land, like the weather or different types of ice, the different parts of the animals, if you're cutting up an animal, those things are all important aspects of the language, and the different place names are important, and the stories around them are important for the Dene history and culture and spirituality and Dene law. Like knowing those stories and knowing those places and the place names in the Dene language is very important. And so the language is really land-based, and we could speak it just in town, but even though I don't speak the language, I know that if you only speak it in town, it's not the full language. And in order to actually pass on the full language, the young people who are learning it need to be able to go out onto the land on a regular basis and hunt and fish and trap and gather berries and medicine, and speak the language in that context. I think that's a really critical part of revitalizing the language and then passing that on. I think a big part of that loss of the language is just kind of living in a town life. So it's a lot harder to learn, like to become fluent in the Dene language if you're living in town and you're going to school. And when I was a kid, there was no Dene language programs in school or immersion. And so when you're taken off of that kind of land-based lifestyle where you would be spending a lot of time on a daily basis with your elders and your grandparents, and they would be speaking the language. When you're taken out of that context and you're put into kind of a town life where you have TV and you're going to school during the week and you're using English, I think it really makes it difficult to create that environment on a regular basis where little kids are kind of immersed in Dene language. Because I think if the kids don't have that kind of immersion aspect, it's difficult to pick it up. So we're in a world where we're expected to learn English. Like you have to know English or French or some colonial language to get by, and you're encouraged to get an education and go to school, and that's important. But that focus really takes you out of the environment that fosters learning the Dene language. And I think it's something that when I was a kid and I was going to school, especially in Yellowknife, because there was no Dene language program when I was a kid, and it's a different dialect here, that people in terms of the kind of broader systems like the education system, it wasn't thinking that way. I think now more and more we see Dene language immersion programs for like kindergarten. That's one thing we're talking about in Good Hope right now, is trying to put in junior kindergarten as Dene immersion instead of in English, so that before those kids get to kindergarten, when they're like 4 or 5 years old, they're in an immersion program. More and more people are starting to look at that and realize that if you're going to live like a town life, then you need to really consciously create those spaces for ensuring that the kids have a way to learn the language. Water is important. I mean, we need water. We need water to live, and everything needs water to live. And I know in our stories and legends, there are things that live in the water that are really culturally significant as part of our legends and our stories. So water is very culturally significant, but I think it goes beyond those specific stories, because we need the water to access the land, and there's places on the land that have those stories and legends associated with them, and it's those stories that really contain like the elements of Dene law, like how we lived as a people, what is our identity. That's contained in those stories and legends, and we have to be able to pass that on to the young people. And if there's no water left, if the rivers are too low and we can't go out by boat, or if we can't drink the water, like I grew up just drinking the water right out of the river. I've never boiled water my whole life. I've never put like those tablets or done any like filtering. We just drink the water, and I've done that my whole life. And if we can't do that anymore, then we can't go on the land, and we can't pass on that knowledge to future generations. People will be in a situation where we're literally losing our identity as Dene. So the water is important because of the, biology and ecosystem reality that we need to drink water, and everything else does. But it's also important as like it's a fundamental part of the land. The land is everything. The way Dene talk about it is the water, it's the earth, it's the rocks, trees, animals, us. The water is an essential element of the land, and the way we engage with the land spiritually and culturally, and just in terms of access, is based around water. It's based around the different rivers and the different lakes. And so if we don't have that, we lose our identity as Dene. And that's fundamentally, that's a human rights issue. Like, people have the right to be who they are, and people have the right to speak their language and practice their culture. And if the water starts to disappear, if we can't drink the water, if the animals can't survive in the water, then it's a fundamental human rights impact to us as Dene.